Welcome to the Brain Health Hookup. I'm Laurel Myers Hurst, your resident groovologist, and I believe that better mental health needs to be fun. Here we talk about mental wellness, we explore the physical, emotional, and relational needs we have as humans with the science and practices that help our mental health to flourish. Plus, we dive into my signature method, groove therapy, that engages folks in groove-based music making to lift mood and lower inflammation and pain. I'm so glad you're here. So let's hit it. Well. That's a deep subject. Welcome to the first in a feature series on health literacy. There are so many questions about how things get done behind the scenes that patients are never privy to. And if I'm explaining these things again and again in appointments because we aren't taught these things. It's all sort of a mystery how insurance and providers, pharmacies, and other health vendors decide what happens, what you pay for, how to get things. And I'm here to make that process a little bit easier for you today, if I can. If you have any questions after today's episode, I'd love to hear them. I may say things even in the context of this podcast that you don't understand. That would be a great feature in a future health literacy series podcast. So your main question might be, why won't my insurance company pay for my medication? I hear this all the time. I want to be clear that there are two kinds of medications available on the market. One type is brand name medication and the other is generic type medication. So brand name medications are patented medications. That means a company has the exclusive rights to sell that molecule in that formulation for a certain amount of time. The company has invested a lot of money in proving that that medication is not going to harm people and that it will help at least better than placebo or a dummy pill. So that investment that they've made in getting a better remedy for the symptoms that they're trying to amend, they want to get their return on their investment, right? So when they develop a molecule, get it all the way through the very many steps of the FDA approval and safety monitoring process, they want to get their money back by that exclusive right to sell the medication. I'm not kidding you when I say these medications are worth hundreds or thousands of dollars per monthly prescription. You can imagine how, as much as the pharmaceutical companies want to recoup their investment and get the money back in the terms of the brand name medication price, insurance companies don't love to pay that price. And so the insurance company will usually make sure the provider and the patient have done their due diligence to work through some generic medications that might work just as well or even better than a brand name alternative. So are brand name medications better than generics? That's a really good question. So brand name medications do sometimes have completely new mechanisms of action, meaning in the past, we've always tried to control or reduce or amend symptoms in a certain way through certain pathways, cellular communication or cellular action in the body. And then some company has a breakthrough and they get a completely new way of doing something. That new mechanism of action may really be much better than the old way we used to do it. Maybe it has less side effects. Maybe it has a better effect on symptoms. Maybe it causes less collateral damage, less weight gain or something else, a metabolic change in your body, like the way your heart rhythm is. Maybe a new medication doesn't change heart rhythms to the worst the way an older medication did. So brand name medications can be better than generics, but that's not the only reason. Once a medication has gone through all of its exclusive time for selling for a company and a generic can be made available, there's not a lot of rules about access to what that molecule is. It's kind of the Wild West of companies trying to run tests on the molecule of the brand name medication, come up with the closest molecule they can in the cleanest delivery system they can and approximate the action of that medication. So while the brand name company does have to say what atoms are in the molecule, they don't have to exactly say how the molecule's put together. And if you've ever taken a chemistry class with those little balls and sticks, you know there's lots of different ways to make those molecules fit. So it's interesting. There's a little bit of strategery going on behind the scenes in making sure generics aren't too easy to put on the market, and brand name medications might be better. So there are truly cleaner molecules sometimes in the brand name original medications than in the generics. And then over time, sometimes we get better and better versions of a medication. So one of my greatest examples is a very, very, very safe sleep medication that's little used. The brand name is called Dayvigo, still available in the brand name form. It's amazing because people don't have sedation side effects after taking it for sleep. It's safe for their brain. It's safe for their organs. No kidney or liver damage from taking it the way you might get from other sleep drugs. Tricky thing about Dayvigo is it has about a 17-hour half-life. That means at 17 hours, Dayvigo's only halfway through your system if you have a typical metabolism. You might see the problem in having a sleep medicine that lasts almost full strength for 17 hours, right? So this was an area where progress could be made. And one particular Japanese company took this problem in hand and said, we're going to take that idea for that class of medications and we're going to get something with a shorter half-life. So they did a lot of manipulation and a lot of tests and finally found a medicine that worked the same safe way for 8 hours. Yes, they are going to make bank. So it's worth all the investment in that case to make a brand name medication. So what if I want my patient to get Dayvigo, which is a brand name medication, or QUVIVIQ, an even more expensive, newer brand name medication? Well, you might have heard people say, or you might have been tempted to say, how can my insurance company tell my prescriber what I can have? Well, your insurance company can't really tell your prescriber what you can have. All they can really say is what they will and won't pay for. And when you look at the cost at the end of the day, you might say, I wouldn't be willing to pay for that either. So you can kind of see your insurance company's point in a way. But the way that insurance companies handle this is a process called prior authorization. Prior authorization means that the prescribing provider, through one of a few different means, goes to the insurance company and asks the company what they will pay for in terms of a certain diagnosis, a certain class of medications, and so forth. One way around this is really to call your own insurance company. Any patient can call their own insurance company and ask them what the step therapy is for a certain diagnosis, or if they're considering a type of medication, what might be required as far as steps of generic steps to get there. So there's a number of different ways. If your prescriber just writes a prescription to the pharmacy might turn around and tell the patient, oh, your provider has to put in a prior authorization for that. That means that your insurance already denied the claim and you have to go through those steps of prior authorization. So prior authorization, again, is when the prescriber is asking your insurance company, will you pay for this medicine if we dispense it, or if the pharmacy dispenses it? So the provider can write a script for the medication. The pharmacy tells the patient, yeah, your prescriber is going to need a prior authorization for us to process this claim again. Notice I said that the pharmacy tells the patient. Now, there are a few companies out there, pharmacy companies, that try to help out patients by saying, oh, we contacted your provider. Trust me that a lot of providers' e-prescribing systems do not have a way to receive that feedback. And you can be waiting a long time not understanding where your prescription is and why it hasn't been given to you. So the patient is always the go-between between the insurance company, the pharmacy, and the prescribing provider. Does it seem unfair? Probably. It probably feels bad to feel like you have to both go to the physician or the prescribing provider and somehow do the job of making sure everybody talks to each other. And these are the ways the law is written. Sadly, they put the patient in the middle and it becomes the patient's job to work it out. That is a sad but true fact. So if you get the message from calling your pharmacy that a prior authorization is required, or if you receive the message from your pharmacy that a prior authorization is required, and you report that back to your provider, what do they do next? Your provider goes through a system called Cover My Meds. So all the insurance companies have gotten together. They have a kind of clearinghouse company in between all of them, like a warehouse where every provider can enter every prior authorization they need to enter for every company. So no matter what, bone doctors and psychiatric providers, we go to the same place. We put in Cover My Meds, a request that company, Cover My Meds, that insurance companies pay for, will message the insurance company and say, hey, this provider and this patient would like this medicine. Will you pay for it? Or if you won't, what do they need to do to get there? What do they need to try first? And what will you pay for? Meaning, what will you pay for? So the provider can, in some cases, reach out to the insurance company and ask for a prior authorization. This is much more common in case of surgeries or big packages of physical therapy. I think when patients hear prior authorization, for pharmacy, they assume that that's more like the surgical thing. Like that's the physician or the prescribing provider's job to reach out first for the prior authorization. But when it comes to medication, it's not quite like that. It's something else that comes first. It's the reach out from the patient. It's the Cover My Meds request. It's not usually the provider in any way directly reaching out to the insurance company. So the response from the insurance company is usually some set of demands for what generics would be paid for before a brand name medication is reimbursable or what they'll pay for. Sometimes people have already failed several medications. The Cover My Meds request is both a written request from your provider for the medication that you would like reimbursed, plus a copy of your most recent clinical note. So all the questions we asked, all the background information we collected, all the nitty-gritty details about all the medications you've tried and failed. So if you feel like you've answered those questions a million times, that's why it's so important. Keeping somewhere in your phone, in a folder, on a digital file, every medication that you've taken, the name of it, the doses, if you've taken more than one dose, when you started and stopped each dose, what side effects you had, what withdrawal effects you had, whether you got any benefits from the medication, and who prescribed it. All this information you should keep forever, because your insurance company will ask for it forever. If I want to prescribe you a sleep medication or a medication for ADHD, and you tried a medication in 4th grade, your insurance company is going to ask me, your provider, who was the previous prescriber, what was the medication, what was the dose, what month and year did you start it, what month and year did you stop it, what side effects did you have, what benefits did you have, and what withdrawal effects did you have, if any. That's a lot of information to ask me to deliver to your insurance company if you don't know. So you can see Prior authorizations are not any provider's favorite thing. Why? Because you don't like to give us all the information. We don't like to type in all the information. We don't like to take the time to tell your insurance company all this information. But these are the steps. And why does your insurance company think they're important? I'm not totally against the whole philosophy of the thing. So medications don't all work for everybody. It's not like a Tylenol where a Tylenol pretty much relieves pain for everybody. Other kinds of medications are do and do not work for some people, and do not work effectively or without side effects for different people. The best number that we have to go by when it comes to medication and your chances of success is a data set called the number needed to treat. Number needed to treat is a number that most companies collect, a data set that most companies collect as their medication has been to market for a while for a specific diagnosis. Number needed to treat is a data set that tells us if we give one patient this medication for this condition and they go into remission, how many more people do we need to treat before we get another one that goes into remission? This is, I think, fundamentally, you're right to know when you get a psychiatric medication what the number needed to treat is, because the number needed to treat for many common antidepressants is between 1 in 7 and 1 in 11 to 13. So that means if we give the medicine to one person, we have to give it to between 7 and 13 more people before we get another person that goes into remission. Don't you think that's good to know? Because when you get a medication from a provider, they very often say something like, try this medication. Tell me how you like it. That's not the same as saying, we expect this medication to address these symptoms in this many days to weeks. It works for 1 in 4, 1 in 7, 1 in 13 people. We hope you'll be one of the many. And if you're not, we're going to try this medication after. Now, that, in my idea, is treatment planning. But we don't hear that kind of talk very often, that kind of frank and more detailed information. I don't know whether we think patients can't understand or handle that information, but I'm giving it nonetheless. I hope it's helpful. I do tend to find my patients are more hopeful and they come back, right? If the medication is working or doesn't work, they're coming back because I gave them a plan. This is how it should go. If it doesn't go that way, this is what we're going to do next, that kind of thing. So your insurance company is hoping when it comes to generic medications, you will be that 1 in 4, 1 in 13 for whom it works amazing. And if it does, they've just saved themselves a whole lot of money and also saved you and your provider a lot of copay payment, hassle, and so forth. So I'm not opposed to the idea that generics should be tried when they're appropriate. After your provider puts in that cover my meds, say you've failed a few generics, they're like, we think you probably would qualify for a brand name medication. Once they put that cover my meds request in for the prior authorization, you'll get formal notice back in the form of a letter, and your provider will receive a fax saying whether the prior authorization is denied for payment or approved for payment. If you're denied for payment, there will be a very, very specific protocol for what medications the insurance company expects you to fail. It's usually a series of generic medications, but sometimes it's a few, 1 or 2 low cost brand name medications as well. That's the case for QVIVIQ, which is one of the newest and most effective sleep medications. Dayvigo's cheaper, even though it's a brand name. So a lot of companies would like you to try that. Some companies hold that one at arm's length and don't even pay for QUVIVIQ in any situation. And they have that right. You still can get the medicine. You just have to pay full price. When the prior authorization is denied, never fails to surprise me how extensive some of the requirements are. I have seen in one case, denial come back for a brand name depression medication for a patient who was very sick and had already failed 3 generic medications. The prior authorization came back that they had to fail 5 generic medications before the insurance company would pay for 1 brand name medication. Now, if you can imagine yourself feeling terrible, terrible symptoms of depression, and you had already failed 3, think about how much time that would take. And then adding 2 more failures. That word even sounds so heavy, right? That is not the case with most insurers. Most insurers, you fail 2, sometimes 3, 5. I was about ready to write my congressman, and I did encourage the patient to write both the state legislature and the federal legislative representatives to express their concern about this insurance company's policy, because the time that any patient would need to be in limbo with failed trial after failed trial after failed trial, given that most trials are between 6 and 8 weeks in length. I thought that was inhumane. That's the worst of it. In theory, like I said, I agree with the process of helping patients find low-cost, effective medications. I'm on board with keeping healthcare costs low, and I definitely look for those alternatives for patients. And when necessary, we go through the prior authorization process. The one thing I do want you to take away from this, remember, you are the hub between your insurer, your pharmacy, and your prescribing provider. If anyone is giving you the runaround, you kind of have to take names and dates and document quotes of what they told you, because if you come back and say, on this date, this person told me that, it does solve or does shorten the path to people taking responsibility for what they need to do to get you the answers that you need. And yeah, it's one unfortunate part of taking your health care under your own control. But I hope this little health literacy lesson has helped to untangle a really complicated part. This is one of the most complicated processes in the whole realm of getting healthcare reimbursement from an insurance company. I hope I made it a little less painful today. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Brain Health Hookup. I hope this episode radiates with the conviction that generating mental wellness needs to be fun and safe. We want you to find your power and understand your innate design to flourish in everything you do. And we hope that inspires you to come back and listen for more. I'd love for you to leave a review of this podcast, as it helps the show grow to reach more people who need to make mental wellness fun. You can find the leave a review button, as well as all the YouTube visuals, bonuses, and ways we can help to support you on our website, podcast.grooveforhealth.com. I appreciate you more than words can say. See you next time, and remember, together we have everything we need.